This is Red Eyes Radio. Hi everyone, and welcome. You are listening to Red Eyes Radio. This is Henrik Palmgren, the editor of red-eyes.net, coming to you from the west coast of Sweden. I will be your host the following hour, and thank you everyone who has tuned in today, either through bbsradio.com or through the archives sometime in the future. As we usually do on this program, since it's only an hour short, we dive right into the topic and at hand and our guests. And we have a very special guest with us today. We have one of the authors to Astrotheology and Shamanism joining us. He is also one of the lecturers of the Pharmacratic Inquisition, a brilliant video lecture that very generously have been shared for free over at their site, gnosticmedia.com. Jan Irvin is his name, and as I said, he is the co-author together with Andrew Rutaji. And I do want to mention that we tried to get both Jan and Andrew on the show, but a combination of things, the time zone issue with me being up here in Sweden and them over there in the US, and the technology currently available in the studio has resulted in that we only can connect one phone, but I'm nonetheless very glad that John has joined us. So welcome to the program, Jan, and thank you for taking the time to be here.
You're welcome, Henrik, and thank you for having me on. Much appreciated.
Yeah, great. I want to mention right at the beginning here that I first looked at your video lecture that I mentioned earlier, the Pharmacratic Inquisition, about, I guess, 1.5 years ago, and I had come in contact with much of the research and work of Jordan Maxwell, and then on top of that, I saw the research that you guys have done, and the combination that happened there was really, for the lack of a better word, a revelation, and it basically blew my mind, and it's really brilliant. So thank you for putting it out there and making it available.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
It was a project that we originally that video wasn't actually supposed to be released. It was done as a project to gain sponsorship so that we could finish the book, and then we had such a high demand for our research at the time that we ended up releasing the video anyway.
Ah, I see. Okay, and I should mention also that everyone listening who haven't seen this video lecture should, right after this show, head on over to Jan and Andrew's site, which again is gnosticmedia.com. And take a look at that. It's a 3.5 hour long presentation, and you don't want to miss that if you find some of the things that we'll be talking about here today interesting. So to start things off here, I think it's always interesting and a good way to start it at the beginning, so to speak. So it would be interesting to hear from you, Jan. How did you become involved in this kind of research, and how did you end up writing the book Astrotheology and Shamanism together with Andrew?
Well, the process sort of started out slow back in the early 90s. I had met with a fairly well-known author, especially here in the United States, named Jack Herer, who was the founder of the modern-day hemp movement, and he brought all of the knowledge about industrial hemp and medical marijuana and the use of the plant as a viable, natural, renewable resource throughout history, and all of its information. And I had become friends with him in about 92, and he used to always tell me that religions were based on psychedelic drugs and star worship and things like that, and at the time, I thought he was crazy, and he kept always pushing the ideas on me and giving me research to check out. Some of it I would read, some of it I took years to read, but eventually the idea captured my attention. I suppose in about 95 or 96, there was a gathering of the Minds Convention in Orange County that had a lot of speakers like Dennis McKenna and Timothy Leary and Bruce Eisner and Peter Stafford and a lot of the various researchers out there on the entheogenic community.
Mm.
And so that was what made me realize at that time that there was more to the idea of entheogens playing a major role in religion and everything that we consider in some aspect reality.
Yeah.
It suddenly started looking or appearing to play a far more important role in all of that. So
yeah.
Coming forward from there, just over the years, beginning to dig further and further into the research and learning more and more about it, just kept opening up newer avenues of research that were actually older, and we realized at some point that we weren't uncovering anything new, that this was archaic information.
Yeah.
And shamanism was very widespread, and so was archaeoastronomy, astrotheology, and just applying these ancient global ideas of time and drugs and plants and poisons and things like that made us realize that there was a global pattern that followed through shamanism and the knowledge of the stars that hadn't really been looked at directly, combining the two before.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, what's his name? Jack Herer, I guess.
Yes.
And his research was that about primarily about industrial hemp, I guess.
Yeah, and he, during his research on industrial hemp and the history of so-called marijuana and everything,
yeah,
he had come across the research of Gordon Wasson and John Allegro, and he had spent several years researching John Allegro's claims in The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross that Christianity was based on a psychedelic mushroom and sun and star worship.
Yeah.
And John Allegro wrote The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross in 1970, and it was widely marginalized, not accepted. But, there were a few people that did accept it and kept looking into it, and Jack had turned me onto the research in the early 90s, and I just kept digging into it, probing further and looking at a lot of the things that Allegro was saying, one thing that none of the other scholars would really want to talk about is an ahistoricity theory of Jesus and the biblical characters. Everybody accepts them as literal history.
Yeah.
And John Allegro took them as allegory representing sun and star worship and drug references. And it's actually, it might seem sort of far-fetched at first, but the more you dig into it and look at other cultures and religions and how they formed, we look at Native Americans who use entheogens like peyote, and South Americans and Central Americans who used mushrooms and ayahuasca and had extensive knowledge of the cosmos and stars and galaxies and the Mayan calendar measuring 18 different calendars that the Mayans had, measuring all different ratios of time and things like that. And so when we start putting into perspective all of these different cultures that use these substances and also had a great deal of knowledge for the heavens at night, obviously they didn't have city lights distorting the sky at night. It was a much more important role that taught them when to harvest and plant and store food, and the knowledge of the plants for healing and for enlightenment, and for not only that, but for poisons and drugs, for warfare, etc. was very important knowledge that was after generation, and that was the knowledge of the plants.
Yeah.
And we found a sort of coalescence between the two ideas that other scholars hadn't really combined, in the macrocosm, microcosm, as above, so below theories of religion, and started looking at those two as actually bringing together shamanic thought with astrotheological knowledge, and so that was the formation of our book.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, astrotheology, what does it mean?
Well, astro comes from the word star, or it's Latin star, and theo is God, and logi or logos is the word or the study of. So astrotheology is how the heavens and the stars and the sun were revered by ancient peoples as gods or deities. And then another concept that I mentioned a minute ago is archaeoastronomy.
Yeah.
And archaeo being ancient or past studies, ancient peoples, and astro or archaeoastronomy, how ancient cultures used astronomy and how it affected those cultures. And that could be everything from the creation of calendars and the measurement of time, the study of the precession of the equinoxes, lunar calendars, solar calendars, and sort of an encompassing base that spreads out into astrotheology, and then from there into what is today known as astrology, but we don't really get into the so-called predictions of astrology. Astrotheology stops at the deities and the meanings of the deities of the stars, instead of trying to interpret some predisposed prediction from them.
Yeah, and to tie this back here, if I'm correct here, was it John Allegro who was one of the three translators of the Dead Sea Scrolls? Isn't that right?
Well, he was a part of a team of, I think there was probably 7 or 8 of them. The team was formed by Father Joseph Millick, and he was the only non-Christian member of the Dead Sea Scrolls translators.
Uh-huh.
And he had actually started out as a Methodist minister, but the further he got into studying languages, realized that it proposed more and more problems in his religious beliefs that couldn't be answered from his theological studies. So he began to study ancient Sumerian, Akkadian, Aramaic, these ancient languages, Hebrew, etc., and started to notice that there were many correlations, that if we're brought in together, propose many different